Hello and welcome students. Welcome to your economics class. Today we are going to start our last topic of this chapter, that is trade policy, or we can say the policies related with foreign trade. In this particular topic we are going to we are going to understand about the different policies made for the foreign trade as well as for the trade purpose. Basically, in this particular topic, we have to learn about the international trade, that is foreign trade. What are the major role of foreign trade? What are the situation of foreign trade at the time of independence as well as after the independence, and what are the major policies made for the trade purpose? So basically, in this particular topic, the major trade policy is import substitution. So we have to discuss that thing also. So first of all, we have to understand what is international trade. Basically, the trade or buying and selling of goods or service beyond the political boundary of a country, that is known as international trade. Basically, in this particular international trade, import, export, interport, these are the things includes in the international trade. So particularly, uh, at the time of independence, we know that India was under the control of Britishers and the colonial rule. So at the time of independence, the situation of international trade was not so good. India was, although a major uh, exporter in the world for its raw material, but beside that, it is also a major consumer for the goods produced by the British industries. Basically, India was a consumer of finished goods and the exporter of raw materials during the time of independence, at the time of independence. So, although India has having a surplus of export over the import, still that uh, India is not be able to have such surplus in terms of money. In terms of goods, India exports more units as compared to goods that is imported, but in terms of money, India is not able to uh, sell or export its goods to the other countries. So that was the situation of India's foreign trade. India, at the time of independence, the total imports was estimated at rupees 31 crore, but the balance of trade has shrunk to 14 crore. That means the total amount of goods exported is near about 17 crores only. That means there is a inverse or unfavorable balance of trade. Now, what is balance of trade? That is the difference between the goods exported and the goods imported. That is known as balance of trade. At the time of independence, the balance of trade was also not so good for the India. It is quite unfavorable for Indian industries. So after the independence, there were some policies made. Some industries were settled for the purpose of construction and for the purpose of manufacturing the finished goods. So after the independence, there were a subsequent rise in both import as well as export, but there are some trade restrictions were made by the government, such as its tariff policy. The government's tariff policy is that in which the government is charging a higher rate of import duty on the goods that are imported from the foreign country. And there were this is done because India doesn't want to uh, consume more goods of the foreign country, as well as they doesn't want to expand the foreign exchange reserve. So there is a composition of foreign trade which includes uh, agricultural exports, such as um, such as the raw materials for the finished goods, the farm product for the domestic territories, and the farm product for the foreign countries. So basically, that was the goods from primary sector which is exported. There were decline in the share of conventional items, such as um, food grains, jute, tea, minerals, etc. These are the conventional items which were exported before the independence as a raw material. But after the independence, there were subsequent decline in the export of conventional item. So this is the thing in which India is exporting their goods. After this, the India has adopted a inward looking trade strategy, that is import substitution strategy. Basically, import substitution is implies domestic production of those goods which the economy has been importing from rest of the world. Basically, India wants to produce more of the commodity which is previously India is going to be is previously India is importing from the different country. So they want to save the foreign exchanges by the restricting the volume of import. So there were some restrictions made for the import, that there is a limit were appointed, limit were signed for the purpose of importing the goods. The next thing is related with developmental imports. There were developmental goods were imported from the different countries for the purpose of industries, like plant and machinery, which is essential for growth and development of industries, and they are also used for the purpose of increasing the production and its quality. But due to lack of investment fund, the industries of India are not able to buy such goods. By adopting inward-looking trade strategy, the government preferred to the economize the use of foreign exchange. That is, they have to use lesser amount of foreign exchange to purchase the goods from the different countries, and they wanted to maximize the generation of foreign exchange through their export promotions. The government also wanted to protect the domestic industries from the international competition, as India's domestic territory industries are not able to compete with the foreign industries due to lack of technology, lack of machines, and lack of investment. So these were steps were taken for the purpose of inward looking trade strategy. So there were some good impact as well as some bad impacts of inward looking trade strategy. First, we are talking about some good impacts. There were a structural transformation due to inward looking trade strategy. Structural transformation occurs when there is a rise in the percentage share of secondary and tertiary sector in GDP. That means due to inward looking trade strategy, there is a increase in the contribution by secondary and tertiary industry uh, to the GDP of the country. And structural transformation also includes in economic growth along with the structural transformation, that is economic development, which includes growth as well as modernization, equity, and greater opportunities for employment. Now, due to import substitution and increase in the domestic industries, the employment opportunities were also generated. The next thing is next good impact is growth of sunrise industries. Basically, rising industries are known as sunrise industry. That means in time period of 1950 to 1990, it was an era when there were a lot of industries were rises in India, such as electronic industry. So therefore, these industries are all known as sunrise industry. And for the purpose of their protection, the government has introduced uh, licensing raj as well as import substitution policy. No wonder uh, government has provided protection, but it also has imposed a very heavy duty, heavy import duty on the import of electronic goods. So these were the major, these were the good impacts of inward looking trade strategy. One more thing is opportunities of investment. Due to import substitution or inward looking trade strategy, there were increase in the opportunities of investment in the domestic territory. More domestic industries were settled during the period of 1950 to 1990, and there were subsequent rise in the interest for the investment in domestic territory. These are some good impacts of inward looking trade strategy, but there were some bad impacts are also there. So first we are talking about there were an inefficient public monopolies. Although a lot of industries were settled, public sector enterprises were settled, but they are inefficient to produce goods in a bulk quantity as well as with a good quality. They are not able to compete with the other country, and there were lack of competition, and which leads to lack of modernization, as we are not getting the competition with the foreign industries, so we are not going to be modernized. There were indiscriminate spread of public sector enterprises. The public sector enterprises were only set up in the few places, but uh, apart from these places, no such public sector were settled in the other areas. So there were indiscriminate spread of public sector enterprise. So these are some bad impacts of industrial policy resolution. So overall, this were in the this much is in your second chapter of the Indian economic development. So at the last, after when we are concluding, there were some good impacts as well as some bad impacts of policies made by the government up to the seventh 5 year plan, which is ended in the year 1990. And in the 1991, in year 1991, new economic policy has been introduced, which we are going to discuss in the next chapter. So that's it for today's video. Thank you.